Good afternoon. It's almost time for our Timbercrest chat. The chat will begin at 2:30. It's 2:27 right now. A couple people have asked about recordings of the Timbercrest chat and where you can find them. You can find them. We have a Timbercrest YouTube channel. You can find them there. I try to save or share some of these videos that are pertinent to our Timbercrest Facebook page. And you can click the link there and that sort of thing. In the early days of the Timbercrest chat, we didn't record them. We didn't really even think we had the ability to do that, but we do. And so the chats that were done in the early days, as I said, we just don't have a recording of those. As far as other ways of viewing these, most of the time for the Timbercrest chat and for Evensong and for Chapel, if we've decided to share those things, those are available. The title usually will say a Timbercrest chat and what the subject is and the date and the subject, or the chapel's the same way, who the chapel speaker is and the date. And that's about the best way we can do it. We need to go into this YouTube channel that's been set up for us and figure out a way of, I don't know, reducing the number of videos that are there, because I know that some of the times that we've called bingo, those are on the YouTube channel, but we've used this medium here in order to provide broadcasting over Channel 2, which has been very good. It's been a great fix for us, thanks to David Sollenberger. But as far as future use and that sort of thing, in the YouTube channel, I'm not sure how that's going to work. So there again, so there you have it. Well, I've chatted us away up to about 2:30, so I'm going to just check to make sure of the time. Yeah, it's time to get started. I'm not wearing a mask today, and a couple people have asked about why don't we wear a mask when we're on Channel 2 or broadcasting from the chapel on Channel 2 or whatever. It's a very simple reason, and I think most people understand this. A large number of people at Timbercrest deal with hearing impairments, hearing problems, and the masks muffle what we say. Even when we're speaking clearly, the masks muffle those things. And so our microphones in that are, I mean, they do what they do, and so when we're in the chapel, the speakers are allowed to take off their masks. Although I should mention, for example, I mentioned in chapel this morning, we had a couple people in here, not many, just 2 or 3. And the only person without a mask on was me, because I was a speaker. But everybody else in the chapel wears a mask. And we want you to continue to do that if it's at all possible. As far as things coming up go, tomorrow is the usual. Bingo and exercise are back in the assembly room and the recreation room. Exercise class is at 9:30 now, and again, we have social distancing going on. You have to wear your mask to exercise class. There's hand sanitizer down there, and the chairs always were spaced at least 6 feet apart. And we want to encourage everybody to continue to keep that 6 feet distance as you go to the recreation room. Bingo also is the same way. You can play bingo in the assembly room. The chairs, again, are at least 6 feet apart. You do have to wear a mask while you play bingo in the assembly room. And we are going to be sanitizing the cards every time they're used. We want to just to make sure, just as an extra precautionary measure that way. There's a couple things coming up to sign up for, and the due date for one of them is tomorrow, and that is meal out, the lunch brought in next Tuesday is for El Mezquite in the Mexican restaurant. There's an abbreviated menu for that. It's posted on the bulletin boards here in the manor. If you live in the neighborhood homes and you want that, give Rhonda a call and she can tell you that. Again, it's a modified menu. We talk with the restaurants and try to see what are some things that would be most likely to be ordered, so that when they get a large group order, we can take care of that. I want to say we had 20 or 24 meals ordered, I think, from Pizza Hut the last time, and we're expecting a large order also this time for El Mesquite, so just so you know that's why. We also have available in the neighborhood market now ice cream from the Igloo, and it's in a cup that's $2 a cup. It's or $2.50 a cup, and that's available in the neighborhood market. So you want to stop by and pick that up. If those things sell, we'll continue to carry ice cream from the Igloo in the market there. It's a nice thing to do. On Channel 2, as far as it goes, tomorrow at 8:15, of course, is chapel. At 3:30 tomorrow is the grief support group, also on Channel 2. Go ahead and take a listen. And 9 o'clock Sunday morning is the worship service that you can listen to here on Channel 2, or as I said, after the service, tune into the YouTube channel. That's enough yammering for me for the time being. Today's program isn't an interview, but it's I want to talk about a couple things that are important for Timbercrest, and one thing that I get asked a lot. So that'll be at the very end if there's time. The history and the heritage of Timbercrest is really important to me. It's something that I don't take lightly. I think it's something that we here at Timbercrest, if we forget it, we'll lose a huge part of our identity. It's important for us to remember that Timbercrest was started as a mission. Timbercrest continues as a mission, even though we are nothing like the original home that was founded in 1889. I'm going to try shutting this curtain here. Yeah, that's better. That's better. The home that started in 1889, though, was the result of both vision and mission. And many of you know the story already of Levi Miller, a fairly well-to-do Brethren farmer in Miami County. Levi Miller had a passion, had a vision for taking care of older adults in the 1880s. And by 1889, he donated the land that the Mexico Church of the Brethren home, it was called at that time the Old Folks and Orphans Home, not of the Church of the Brethren in 1889, because the Church of the Brethren wasn't called Church of the Brethren until like 1903 or something like that. But it was a place for older adults. He built the first building, gave the first land, and said, we need to support this. We need to get behind that. And Timbercrest, as it is today, is, as I said, absolutely nothing like that. But but the mission and the vision for Timbercrest has been persistent through the years. The vision is what kept Timbercrest going through some difficult times. Right before World War I, there were financial difficulties at the home. There were the churches were, at that time, the churches were essentially the sole source of support for the Mexico home, and the churches began to lose interest as happens. One generation to the next becomes interested or passionate about different things, and the support for the churches began to wane. But then the World War I came along, and then the Roaring '20s came along, and things began to pick up. And then the Depression hit, and again, without vision and mission, those things wouldn't have continued. But people, especially in those days, it was almost 100% Church of the Brethren people. They had a vision to keep the Mexico home going. They had a vision for stepping up to the plate. And there's records, not just during the Depression, but even before that, of churches having meat cannings and donating part of that meat to the home, bringing in produce from the garden or canning produce from the garden, and all that sort of stuff that brought people in from the churches that were around the Mexico area at the time, including Manchester, including some of the southern churches in that, even though that was a project at the time of the Middle District, or what was at that time called the Middle District of Indiana, that way. So the idea of a vision and a mission to provide this kind of service carried us through the Depression. It carried us through World War II also. And after the war, a lot of things began to change at Mexico. It became apparent in the 50s that the facilities at Mexico, although they had served faithfully for 70 or 80 years, the facilities at Mexico weren't adequate. Different superintendents came along and different boards came along, and they said, we're not able to keep this up the way it is now. And so Orville Sherman became the administrator and worked very closely with the board. And in the 60s, under the Great Society program of Lyndon Johnson, funds became more available for the care and the improved care of older adults. And the Church of the Brethren and the Mexico board and that saw an opportunity, and they realized that North Manchester was more central to the population of Brethren in Indiana. It's a little bit more closely affiliated with the college. We're just a mile from Manchester College, or Manchester University. And so those people had vision as well for the future of what would become Timbercrest. And again, they were dedicated, though, to the mission. They were dedicated to the fact that the church is called to serve. In fact, one of the more common and more popular phrases that Orville Sherman used a lot was that Timbercrest is the church in its servant role. And even though 40% of the people who live here now are not Church of the Brethren, I think it was safe to say that for all Christians, Timbercrest is the church in a servant role. We're not here to lord things over anybody, but we're here to serve. And that's the whole purpose behind what we do. There are two different mission statements that have been part of Timbercrest over the years. And the one is an older one, probably developed, it looks like it's developed maybe in the 70s. But I want to share that part of the vision with you, because the 70s and 80s were also a time of transition when a lot of church-related, nonprofit facilities like Timbercrest transferred or changed from being a ministry-oriented or a mission-oriented place over to being for-profit, running for money. And this mission statement was developed, as I said, sometime in the 70s there and the 80s, when that was a big deal. And it says this: as a ministry of the church, Timbercrest exists to provide a loving and enriching community through its Christian values and heritage. These underlying values are emphasized in all aspects of the organization, from broad policy decisions by the Board of Trustees to day-to-day interactions among staff and residents. The dignity and the wholeness of each person is the primary focus, with the facilities, the environment, the programming, and the staffing designed to meet physical, social, emotional, and spiritual needs. Again, in the face of the trend at the time of going for the dollars, Timbercrest, the board, and at that time then in the 70s and 80s would have been David Lorenz, said, keeping us focused on the people who live at Timbercrest is the primary thing, not the dollars. And that's a good thing. Dollars are important, though. Dollars have always been part of the way we do things. Ted Neidlinger used to say, there isn't any mission without margin, and he's right. We do need dollars. So the church's support has always been a vital part of that. it came, as I mentioned earlier, through the intentional giving of produce, the intentional giving of funds, through the intentional paying of accounts. There's a story I don't think it's in the Century of Service, but somewhere I read where the Mexico home had run up a bill with some sort of a grocer or somebody in Peru, that was near Peru at the time, in Peru, Indiana, and some member of the church, maybe it was the Peru church or one of those congregations over there, went in and paid off that bill. So the financial support of the church has always been there. Sometimes people say, well, Timbercrest doesn't need that support. Well, we do. And we still see where the vision and mission are there to provide support for Timbercrest in big ways and small. Through things like the Capital Campaign and through charitable giving, we provide things for Timbercrest that aren't available in a lot of other places and wouldn't be available if it weren't for the giving of many people in the churches and in the community. We see it in small ways when people create scrubbers, or they create towels for us, or they create other things that we can sell in the neighborhood market. So that that money goes back into the mission of Timbercrest. And whether it's money, like I said, charitable assistance or other giving that helps support people who are in healthcare in Crestwood, or if it's small things like buying things in the neighborhood market that helps provide music for the choir and subscription for the library and supplies for the quilt room and other new books for the library and those sorts of things. Big ways and small ways, we've always had that attachment to our vision and mission here at Timbercrest. About 5 years ago, Timbercrest and the board adopted a new mission, a new vision that is a little bit more concise. And it states that our vision as Timbercrest is that adults will age successfully in all aspects of their lives: physically, psychologically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. When we think about Levi Miller's first efforts in Mexico, I think he wouldn't have put it this way. People in the 19th century didn't speak this way. At the same time, I think he would have found great agreement with that he wanted to see older adults taken care of with dignity. And this idea of successfully aging provides that. It gives us a sense of dignity and worth. And then the mission that the board adopted, again, I think about 5 years ago, is that the mission is to be an innovative, collaborative, and trustworthy resource that enables adults to experience aging with peace of mind. Again, we see where the Timbercrest mission stays focused on people, stays focused on the people who live here. Over the years, we've tried a lot of different things to try to expand Timbercrest's reach to provide housing and services for the older adult population. When Timbercrest, for an example, this is when Timbercrest purchased the Snyder Apartments. They used to be called the Snyder Apartments, the yellow apartments over by New Market. Now they're called Plaza Commons. But it was an effort to provide housing and maintenance service for people who maybe financially weren't ready for Timbercrest. Maybe financially they couldn't afford entirely to move to Timbercrest. And so we undertook a way to provide those housings and some basic services for them. Again, keeping that mission in mind, that's what we're about. I want to mention the neighborhood market for a little bit, just to change gears a little bit, that the neighborhood market is a place where we have always sought to provide basic things for the people who live here, not only selling craft items and those sorts of things. In fact, craft items and that are not the biggest things that we sell any longer. We do still carry ceramics. We still carry the scrubbers. We have people that come, actually, sometimes they come and visit their family members here at Timbercrest, and they stop by to buy scrubbers because they want, Those are kind of a unique thing for us. We sell some things for the Lafayette ministry. We have sold in the past some fair trade items in the market. We sell all kinds of things that help carry out mission. Some jewelry from Sherry Searles and from other places. We do that, and that money goes into our resident funds. We sell some basic needs types of things also, because as the mission and the purpose of Timbercrest has changed, so has the neighborhood market. We sell groceries, especially here in the coronavirus crisis. We've sold groceries and more types of things for people in option plan apartments, because the option plan reflects the changing needs of older adults in our day. I remember talking with a couple people when I first started here 22 years ago, that they were talking about when they moved to Timbercrest, or when their parents moved to Timbercrest, they thought it was like heaven. They had a beautiful room, one single room. They had it was all on one floor. Everything at Timbercrest was on one story. Things are very home-like and very nice, kept very nicely there. And people just, I said, they love that. But as times have changed, as retirement expectations have changed, so has Timbercrest changed. And so in our apartments, we have a lot more option plan apartments. More are being converted to option plan apartments. So the market has had to change for us to say, well, it's good for us to carry some bread. It's good for us to carry some basic meal supplies until somebody can get out and go to the grocery on their own, or get out and wait for the shopper to pick some stuff up that way. The proceeds of the neighborhood market, as I said, have always gone into resident funds, allowing us to afford some things that we may not have been able to afford otherwise. Sometimes those purchases have been small, as I said, or relatively small. For example, we get a couple of magazines and newspapers in the Timbercrest library for everybody to share. The Wall Street Journal, the Indianapolis Star, the Wabash Plain Dealer. We get Smithsonian, we get Messenger, and some magazines like that. Those subscriptions are paid for out of resident funds. Music for the choir. The choir has racks of older music, but every choir director over the years has also wanted to buy some new music, try some new things, and that choir music comes out of there. If the guys that work in the wood shop break a band on the bandsaw, or the blades on the table saw get dull, and we need new blades or stuff like that, that comes from resident funds, those payments there. Supplies for the quilt rooms and other things, all that comes out of resident funds, and that's a good thing. Those are good things for us to spend the money on that way. We've had a surplus in resident funds for a couple of years, and one of the things that surplus has helped us to buy is furniture for the terrace outside Crestwood and Healthcare. It's just been a good thing to be able to provide things through resident funds that are meet a need that may not be met otherwise, or might be put on the back burner otherwise. And so we're really grateful for the purchases that are made in the neighborhood market that help fund those kinds of projects. The neighborhood market also is a place of socialization. It's a place where everybody gets together and chit chats and that without having to go to town, and that's a big deal to a lot of people. So we talked about the vision of Timbercrest, talked a little bit about the mission of Timbercrest, and those sorts of things. It's important for us to talk a little bit about the influence or the ways that residents relate to one another and relate to staff. The original mission statement talks about that, and I want to read that statement one more time. The underlying values of Timbercrest are emphasized in all aspects of the organization, from broad policy decisions by the board to day-to-day interactions among the staff and residents. Those day-to-day interactions are are very important to what Timbercrest is all about. A lot of people, I can't believe what kind of warm relationships we have between each other here at Timbercrest. When someone is sick, we get lots of cards. Employees get lots of cards from people who live here. When a resident is sick, there's a lot of residents, a lot of employees that ask about it. A lot of employees go to the funeral home when someone dies. A lot of employees send notes or cards or do little favors every now and then. I just learned about one person who goes every day. The staff member happens to go every day to McDonald's for her lunch. And while she's there, she happens to buy a Diet Coke for somebody who lives at Timbercrest because she knows that person loves Diet Coke. And those kind of little interactions happen literally all the time. We grow in our relationship here at Timbercrest over time by those interactions with one another. And I think it's very special. It's a unique thing about us. I have mentioned in the past that my sister is an RN, and my sister is one who in the past worked for a couple of for-profit retirement community builders. These are the kind of companies that go to these towns all over the country, and they put up a building and say, move in here, and we've got all that going and that sort of thing. And they're assisted living or they're skilled care facilities and that sort of thing. My sister used to be one of those who would go and help open those up as a director of nursing, a regional director of nursing. And one of the things that my sister always says about Timbercrest that I really appreciate is how warm the relationships are between staff and residents. A lot of places, it's just, we just go in and people come in, they clock out, and they're finished with it. But a lot of times you'll see people from Timbercrest talking about people who live here in a very kind and courteous way in the break room or other places because we care about one another. It reminds me of the parable that Jesus tells about the Good Shepherd, where Jesus talks, I think it's in John 10, where he says that he's a good shepherd, and the hireling doesn't care for his sheep. The hireling is just, that's that. The hireling is, they just come in and they do their thing and then they leave. But I think and we have that at Timbercrest. There are some employees that this is just a job for them and they just move on from one job to the next. But we have a lot of employees at Timbercrest who take the work and the mission of Timbercrest seriously. They have ownership. They're like the Good Shepherd. One of the things that Jesus says in that parable is that the shepherd owns the sheep. They're his. They belong to him. He cares for them. And I think there could be said a lot for that sense of ownership that a lot of employees have. We don't have a feeling, I don't think anybody feels that we own residents or we own Timbercrest. That's not what I mean. But there is that feeling of ownership that we're in this together, that they're really, in a truest sense, we love each other. We're good neighbors. We're good friends. And that sense of ownership is reflected in many different ways. I just can't begin to enumerate all the different ways that spirit permeates what we do here at Timbercrest. It's an important thing for us to continue. Most people who are listening to this won't see our Timbercrest employee newsletter called the Crest Line. But the Crest Line is just for employees. It comes out about once a month and just a one page back and forth on one side and the other. But one of the features of that Crest Line every month is the list of employee anniversary dates and how long different people have been here. And it's regular to see most of the list comprised of people who've been here 3 or 5 years or longer than that. Well, anybody who's worked in skilled care or long-term care for any length of time knows, especially for nursing staff, that's just practically unheard of. There's such a turnover especially among nursing aides and QMAs LPNs and that. There's such a turnover because the need is there, and somebody over here says, we'll pay you a little bit more, so they go there, they go here, and plus it's back-breaking work. A lot of people get into that, and if you ask me, nobody did, but if you ask me, aides and LPNs and QMAs should be among the best paid people, because you can't do a good job of caring for folks without that staff makeup. But that's another subject altogether. But it's back-breaking work. It's very hard and very difficult work. And yet we have aides and LPNs and QMAs and RNs who stay here 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that says a lot. Not that they want, that Timbercrest is a great place to work. It's a beautiful place to work. But the thing that we hear from staff over and over again is the relationship with residents is why we do what we do. That takes us back to the mission. That takes us back to the vision of being a place that cares for older adults, seeing older adults not as, little old ladies or little old men walking around, and that sort of thing, but seeing people for who they are with dignity and respect, not seeing the age, but seeing the person. And that's so critically important. I think that goes back the other direction also. Far and away, most people who live at Timbercrest look at staff the same way. We're not just people who work here, but they see us as parents. They see us as grandparents. They see us as, for a lot of the younger people, they see us as students getting ready for a lifelong career that may or may not involve older adults. They see us as persons who have interests. And so one of the things, and I'm going to wrap up with this little illustration. I happened to be walking down the hallway during the supper time delivery of meals here in the manor, where the food service staff stop by with a cart. They deliver the meal and they ask if you want anything else to go with it. What do you want to drink, and all that sort of stuff. And it cracked me up. I went by 3 different rooms as I was going from, I think I was in the chapel, going from the chapel down the hallway towards the front entrance. I went by 3 different rooms where either the resident had asked the staff member about their kids or grandkids, or the staff member had asked the resident about kids and grandkids. And it was so wonderful to hear those kind of conversations, to know that you're not just bringing me my coffee or my milk or my pop or whatever it might be, but that I care about you and your family. And vice versa, the staff members didn't just see the residents as somebody that needed to be served, but they saw them as a person with a whole and complete life. And I just really think that is what makes the mission and the vision of Timbercrest so unique, and makes Timbercrest such a wonderful place, the place that it is today. That's all I have to share today. I'm working on a couple of different interviews, a couple of phone interviews for next week. We're going to be talking again with Nate Bloomfield, the physical therapist. We're going to be talking with a couple people by telephone, and I'll let you know when I get those confirmed, a couple people in town by telephone. And so I hope you find the time and the way to listen. One thing that would be helpful, and I know this is the end of the show, but one thing that would be helpful would be to let me know that you're listening. Since things are beginning to open up and people are being able to move around a little bit more, people are able to go to town and do some things like that, there may be less and less of a need for the Timbercrest chat. So I would love to hear from you that, yes, you listen to this. Yes, you've liked what you hear. You want us to keep going. If you want us to keep going twice a week, which is fine, or if you'd rather see us pare that back and go down to once a week, or I don't think we can add. I don't know that we have time to do that, to add another day of the Timbercrest chat. But please just let me know what you think of the program, if we should continue it once we open up completely, which may be another 6 to 8 weeks. Who knows how long it'll take. But please let me know. Thank you very much for listening. Remember to wear your mask, and we'll see you again soon. Bye now.